And so here we are, module 6 of Fiddlehead's, the Jepson mini workshop. And we're going to continue with our leptosporangia ferns, jumping to a major group of leptosporangia called the Eupolypods, and specifically the Eupolypods 1. And I'll talk about two families here, Dryopteridaceae and Polypodiaceae. So our favorite phylogenies again. Here is this huge clade called the Eupolypods. It's this common ancestor and all of its descendants. That big clade contains about 2/3 of all extant ferns. So if you're out walking and you see a fern, you have a 2-in-1, two out of 3, a 2-to-1 chance that it is a member of this particular group, the Eupolypods. There are two major subclades of Eupolypods, which we creatively call the Eupolypods 1 and the Eupolypods 2. Eupolypods 1 usually have round sori and usually have many vascular bundles in the base of the petiole. So this is a leaf, the stalk of a leaf. If you snip it towards the base of that stalk, you'll see the vascular bundles arranged like this, a bunch of them. Whereas in the Eupolypods 2, the sori are usually linear. And if you snip the base of the petiole, you'll see 2 vascular bundles that are quite big. In fact, you don't even need to snip. You can usually break it and pull, and the vascular bundles are stronger, and so they'll stick out a little bit. You can count them with a naked eye. You don't need any specialized equipment for this. So Eupolypods 1, Eupolypods 2. We're going to talk in this module about Eupolypods 1. So this subclade over here from this common ancestor and all of its descendants. It's a huge group again. Over 1/3 of extant ferns are in this one clade. Here in California, we have 2 families well represented. So light, relatively speaking. One of those families is the wood fern family, Dryopteridaceae, which is the wood ferns, the sword ferns, and so many other relatives that we don't need to worry about. It's relatively straightforward here. Again, I said Dryopteris is the wood ferns and Polypodiaceae are the sword ferns. These are typically terrestrial ferns growing on soil in the understory. They have scaly petioles, and often the whole leaves are scaly, not hairy. And they have round sori that are protected by a prominent indusium, which is either itself round or maybe kidney-shaped. And so here's a coastal wood fern, Dryopteris arguta, a very common species that we'll see if you step outside anywhere here in the East Bay and common throughout virtually all of California. And here's an example of a Polypodiaceae. You can see the scales all along the rachis there. And you can see those round sori. In this case, they have a peltate indusium, i.e. a round indusium that's attached in the middle like a little umbrella. Classic Dryopteridaceae characteristics. Here's an example of the Dryopteridaceae that you can find in California, again, taken from iNaturalist. And so the iconic Western sword fern, of course, is very common and very frequently observed. Here's the coastal wood fern, also super common. And then we get a couple of other Polypodiaceae that you can find. Here's one other Dryopteris. And then we get a few strange. This is a weed, an introduced species that spreads a little bit. More Polypodiaceae, another weed, more Polypodiaceae, Dryopteris, Polypodiaceae. So pretty straightforward as far as these things go. Species level identification can be more challenging, but identifying that it's in Dryopteridaceae is relatively easy, and getting it to the 2 genera is relatively easy. Then the other family I want to talk about in the Eupolypods 1 is the Polypodiaceae, which includes the grammitid ferns, polypodies, and their relatives. This is another huge family, especially in the tropics. Actually, we don't have that many here in California. They're also relatively easy to recognize. They almost always have round exindusiate sori. So here's an example, upside down. Look at those round sori with no indusium. Big round sori, no indusium. You have something in the Polypodiaceae. In addition, they often have long creeping rhizomes. So here's a little bit of a picture of one of those rhizomes. And on the rhizome are these stump-like pegs that are left over when the leaves abscise, which is actually where they get their name from. Polypodiaceae means many feet. And so these were thought to resemble feet or something. And so you can recognize Polypodiaceae also by the rhizomes. You don't even need to see their leaves. All the California species, the natives anyway, are pinnatifid, and they're all in the genus Polypodium. They all look quite similar. And so here's an example of just, again, by UC Berkeley, by the campus, of a bunch of Polypodium growing along the bank. Here's an example, well, not an example, here's the iNaturalist observations of Polypodiaceae for California. Again, all of the natives are in the genus Polypodium. They all look kind of like this. They're all pinnatifid leaves, so not cut all the way to the middle, not cut all the way to the middle, no stalk on these leaflets, and only once divided. They're not divided any further. Then there are a few introduced species that are reported, but you won't. These are mostly in Southern California and so associated with often planted palms again. Look at those nice round exandusiae, really clear. If you see that, you have Polypodiaceae. And that is our crash course in the Eupolypods 1. Are there any questions?